10% of the job titles that exist today did not exist in 2000. Hiring is down 17% year over year. It's going to take 162 years until there is gender balance within artificial intelligence.
Welcome to The Big Question, the series from Euronews where we speak to some of the most influential people in the world of business. Today, I'm joined by Josh Graf, Managing Director and Vice President for Europe at LinkedIn. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Good to see you.
So earlier this year, LinkedIn published their first work change report. What are the key takeaways?
There are a couple of trends that really stood out for me that were quite surprising. The first one is that for people entering the workforce today, they are likely to have double the number of jobs versus people entering the workforce 15 years ago. I grew up at a time where it was relatively normal for people to be in the workplace for 20, 25, 30 years in the same job. Very, very different situation today. The second piece is around the skills changes that we're seeing. 70% of the skills required for everyday jobs today will have changed by 2030. So huge change over the next 5 years. And not surprisingly, the third trend about artificial intelligence. Huge demand for artificial intelligence skills, very little supply at the moment. Artificial intelligence is going to transform the workplace, it's going to create jobs, it's going to change jobs, and it's going to drive productivity.
You mentioned that professionals are going to have twice as many jobs in their career as those who started in the industry 15 years ago. Why is that?
I think people are feeling very different about the workplace today. Compensation is the most important reason why people change jobs today. But if you look at the second and third reasons, they have changed over the last decade. People mostly want great learning experiences. And so there's this very different mindset, which is, I'm going to apply for a role, I am going to thoroughly enjoy it, I'm going to learn as much as possible, and then perhaps my loyalty is more to me versus the company, and I'm going to go figure out something that works for me.
Let's talk about the job market. How is it looking in Europe right now?
Off the back of the pandemic, we saw this intense surge of hiring. And then a lot of those organizations realized that they'd hired too quickly and started downsizing. And the knock-on effect of that was that people in the workplace were super nervous and they were worried that they were going to join a company and potentially be the last in and subsequently the first out. So for a couple of years, we've seen large numbers of people sheltering in place, hunkering down, really focusing on the job and the company that they're working at today. That has started to change a bit, although hiring is still down. If you look at the January data for Europe, hiring is down 17% year over year, and that is still below pre-pandemic levels. And we're seeing particular softness in countries like Germany, in France, and in Italy.
Interesting. And why do you think kind of France, Germany, and Italy are shrinking in particular?
I think it's been a challenging economic environment across Europe, and those markets are generally softer, but there's softness across the entire region. We are seeing some pockets of growth in technology, for example. Technology roles are growing 12-13% year over year out of Ireland, a couple of percentage points out of Spain. If you then do a deep dive within technology, there is an absolute boom in hiring for AI roles.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, 400% up in Italy, 300% up in the UK and Germany, 80% up in France. There is a huge imbalance between supply and demand.
Interesting. Okay. And so if jobs are changing, how are you seeing job roles evolving?
10% of the job titles that exist today did not exist in 2000. So although we feel like we've been on a significant journey of acceleration over the last quarter of a century, we haven't seen anything yet. The next 5 years, especially with the advent of AI, is going to fundamentally transform the workforce. And for me, reinforces the urgency for companies to invest in upskilling and reskilling, specifically in the areas of artificial intelligence.
How are we seeing diversity and equality in the workforce? AI, for example. Is that as diverse as a modern industry should be?
The good news is that there are double the number of women working in AI than there were in 2016. The bad news is that it's going to take 162 years until there is gender balance within artificial intelligence. And that talks to the importance of mentorship programs and sponsorship programs, and really importantly, getting young girls in schools thinking about going into STEM subjects, into science, technology, maths and engineering. Having said that, I do actually believe that there is an opportunity for AI to help rebalance that and ensure that there is a thoughtful balance between men and women within the AI sector. For example, in recruiting, in general, if you look at the data, men will apply for a role if they have, call it 50% of the skills required. Women will generally wait until they have almost all of the skills required for a certain job. Through artificial intelligence at LinkedIn, we can now recommend jobs to you based on the skills that you have and the experience that you have. And we hope that that will then prompt people who are super qualified to apply for jobs where perhaps they wouldn't have applied from them in the past, and create more gender balance, not just within artificial intelligence, but within the broader labour market.
Interesting. And workplace trends since COVID, there was very much a trend of a lot more remote working and then hybrid working. How is that trend developing now?
Hybrid work is a fascinating space, and at LinkedIn we've arrived at a place where the majority of our workforce are working in a hybrid environment. And if you look at the stats more broadly, about a third of roles are being advertised as hybrid. And for those roles, there's relatively good balance between supply and demand. What's particularly interesting, though, is less than 5% of roles are fully remote, and they are attracting 15% of all applications, so 3-to-1 for remote roles. And if you go to markets like Sweden, it's 6-to-1, Germany's pretty high as well. So there is a big imbalance between supply and demand when it comes to fully remote work, and that is increasingly going to become a challenge.
And thinking about, Europe versus the rest of the world, is Europe currently retaining its talent within the workforce?
It depends on the month and the year that you're looking at. So in general, Europe is retaining its workforce. Off the back of Brexit, we did see a significant shift in the UK. We saw an exodus of talent back to Europe and around the rest of the world. Subsequently, the UK started attracting more talent from outside of the EU. But in general, the EU as a whole is retaining some of its best talent. There is an argument that a lot of talent is moving to Silicon Valley in the US, especially in the technology space, but there are brilliant startups all across Europe within the technology space. I am an AI optimist, I'm a Europe optimist. I think there is huge potential for Europe, but I do think there is an urgency to reskill and upskill the workforce today on artificial intelligence skills to prepare them for the jobs of the future versus just the jobs of the past. And if you're a leader today, you need to understand how those technologies can influence your business and your trajectory. If you are an employee today, you need to start experimenting with those tools on a day-to-day basis. You do not want to be left behind. Now is the moment to really embrace those tools.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on The Big Question.